The rain tapped steadily against the cafe windows, blurring the view of the quiet street outside. The late afternoon air carried that damp chill Oregon was known for, and inside, the cafe felt almost too still. Only the low hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of a spoon against porcelain broke the silence. Emma Whitaker sat at a small corner table, her fingers curled around a cup of chamomile tea that had long since gone lukewarm. Across from her, Nathan Brooks shifted in his chair, his gaze drifting toward the rain-slicked glass rather than meeting her eyes. She had rehearsed the moment countless times on the drive over. The words had been sitting on her tongue, ready to fall into the open space between them. She had even imagined how his face might change, surprise, maybe a smile, maybe that boyish laugh she used to love. She was ready to tell him. She was carrying his child. But before she could gather the courage, Nathan spoke first. His voice was uneven, hesitant, but final all the same. "Emma," he began, clearing his throat, "I need to tell you something." She blinked, her lips parting slightly. I was about to say the same," she whispered, her hand brushing nervously against the rim of her cup. "But go ahead." Nathan exhaled sharply, as if forcing the words out. "You're an amazing woman, Emma. Honestly, you deserve so much. You'll be fine. But the truth is, I've fallen in love with someone else." The words seemed to echo off the walls of the empty cafe, louder than they should have been. Emma's chest tightened, her breath catching halfway in her throat. For a second, she thought she had misheard him, but his eyes, still fixed on the rain outside, told her she hadn't. He continued, his tone awkwardly apologetic. "Please don't take it the wrong way. These things happen. We're just different. Maybe I never really loved you the way you thought I did. I met her and everything just felt clear." Emma's hands twitched against the table, her fingers fumbling with the paper napkin until it tore. Her eyes stayed down, fixed on the polished wood grain, as though staring hard enough could keep her from shattering. She nodded faintly, once, then again, as if each nod might shield her from breaking apart right there in front of him. "I don't want you to hate me," Nathan added, finally glancing at her. "And don't try to change my mind. It's over." His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a few bills, and set them on the table. "This should cover the check. Maybe your cab fare, too." Emma's lips parted, but no sound came. She lowered her gaze again, her hair falling across her face like a curtain, hiding the emptiness in her eyes. He lingered for only a heartbeat longer, clearly expecting an outburst. A storm of tears, accusations, maybe anger. But when none came, he shifted uneasily from foot to foot, then turned and walked toward the door. The bell above it chimed faintly as it swung, closed behind him, leaving only silence and the rain. Emma sat frozen in place, her body motionless, her tea untouched. The cafe felt cavernous now, every empty chair an echo of what she had just lost. When the waiter appeared a few minutes later, asking softly, "Your check, ma'am," she barely looked up. She slid Nathan's bills across the table, murmuring, "Yes, thank you," her voice flat, lifeless. The waiter disappeared, and the silence settled again. Slowly, Emma lifted both hands to her stomach, pressing them against the small swell that no one else knew about. Her chin trembled, and then the tears came, hot, heavy, relentless. They rolled down her cheeks in silence, dripping onto her fingers curled protectively over her belly. She sobbed without sound, her body quaking as the truth of her isolation sank in. The secret she had carried so carefully, the new life inside her, was meant to be a gift, a shared joy. But now it was hers alone. And as the rain outside kept falling, Emma realized nothing would ever be the same again. The house was quiet when Emma stepped inside, her shoes leaving faint marks on the worn linoleum floor. The familiar smell of her mother's lavender-scented cleaner hung in the air, oddly sharp, almost suffocating. In the living room, The muted glow of a lamp threw long shadows across the beige carpet. Her mother, Carol, was sitting at the dining table, flipping through a stack of mail. Beside her, Emma's stepfather, Dennis, tapped impatiently at his watch as if counting down minutes he didn't want to spare. Emma hesitated, clutching her bag against her chest. For a moment, she thought about keeping everything to herself. But the weight of what had just happened at the cafe pressed too heavily on her. She needed someone to hear her, someone to say it would be all right. "Mom," she said softly. Her voice cracked in the silence. "Nathan's gone. He left me. And I'm pregnant." Carol's hands stilled on the envelopes. She lifted her gaze, her eyes flickering with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Pregnant." The word came out sharp, almost accusatory. Emma nodded, her throat tightening. "Yes, I was going to tell him tonight, but he broke up with me before I could. He's with someone else." Dennis let out a low groan, leaning back in his chair. "We're going to be late if we don't leave soon," he muttered, checking his watch again. Carol ignored him for a moment, her focus fixed on Emma. "Listen, honey," she began, her tone smoothing into something that was meant to sound reasonable. "You're only 22. You have your whole life ahead of you. These things, they can be taken care of. Safely. Medicine is different now. You'll have other chances. You can have kids later when the time is right." Emma's stomach churned. "Mom, it's not just something to get rid of. It's my baby." Her voice was trembling, desperate, but Carol shook her head firmly. "Emma," she said, folding her arms across her chest, "think about your future. You're still in school, about to graduate. How are you going to manage a baby and a job? You can't just throw your life away because of a mistake." The word mistake sliced through Emma like a knife. She pressed her lips together, trying not to break down in front of them. "Carol," Dennis interrupted, standing now, his tone clipped. "We need to go. The Hendersons are expecting us at 7. If we don't leave now, we'll hit traffic on the freeway." Carol sighed, glancing at the clock on the wall. She picked up her purse from the side chair and slipped the strap over her shoulder. Before heading to the door, she looked back at Emma, her expression caught between impatience and dismissal. "Just think about what I said. You're young. You'll understand later." And then they were gone. The front door shut with a dull thud, leaving Emma in the half-dark of the living room. The silence pressed in from every direction. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where her mother had just been. The air felt colder now, heavier. It wasn't only Nathan who had abandoned her. Even her own mother couldn't see her pain, couldn't see the small flicker of life she already cherished inside her. Her legs gave way, and she sank onto the couch, her arms wrapping instinctively around her belly. The tears she had fought back earlier now burned her eyes again. She had never felt so utterly alone. In that silence, her mind drifted to a different time, a warmer time. She remembered summers as a little girl, running barefoot through her grandmother Margaret's orchard just outside Eugene. She remembered the smell of freshly baked apple pie cooling on the windowsill, the sound of her grandmother's laugh carrying across the yard. Back then, life had felt safe, steady, like the world would always hold her up. Now, sitting in the dark living room of her mother's house, she felt the contrast so sharply it hurt. The only place she could picture finding comfort again was back in that farmhouse, in her grandmother's embrace. For the first time that night, Emma felt the faint pull of hope. Small, fragile, but they're all the same. The morning train rattled out of Eugene just after sunrise, its wheels cutting a steady rhythm against the tracks. Emma sat by the window, her hands folded tightly over her lap, her eyes fixed on the gray blur of passing fields. She hadn't slept all night, but her exhaustion was laced with urgency. There was nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. The city had given her nothing but heartbreak and rejection. The only person who had ever made her feel safe was waiting in the countryside. The further the train moved from the city, the more the scenery shifted. Suburban neighborhoods gave way to open farmland, fields damp with morning dew, barns tucked against rolling hills. The air seemed lighter out here, even through the glass. Emma closed her eyes briefly, letting the rhythmic sway of the carriage calm the storm inside her chest. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering silently to the tiny life within. "We'll be okay. Somehow we'll be okay." By the time the train slowed into the small rural station, the clouds had broken, and thin rays of sunlight spilled over the platform. Emma stepped down with her single bag, her breath catching when she saw a familiar figure waiting at the end of the platform. Grandma Margaret stood there in her worn cardigan, a scarf looped neatly around her neck. Her silver hair caught the light, and her eyes softened the instant they landed on Emma. Without hesitation, she opened her arms wide. "Emma, sweetheart," she called, her voice warm and steady, just as Emma remembered from childhood summers. The moment Emma fell into that embrace, the tight knot in her chest loosened. Margaret's hug smelled faintly of flour and wood smoke, a scent that carried her straight back to simpler days. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt her body release some of its burden. "You should have told me you were coming," Margaret said, keeping an arm around her as they walked toward the old pickup truck. "I would have baked that apple pie you love so much." Emma managed a small smile. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you. I didn't want you to fuss." They drove back along familiar country roads, the fields stretching endlessly under the autumn sky. Margaret filled the silence with gentle questions about Emma's classes, her friends, how she had been holding up. Emma tried to answer, but her words faltered until they were sitting at the kitchen table, steaming cups of chamomile tea between them. The farmhouse was just as she remembered. Lace curtains, jars of preserves lined neatly on the counter, and the old clock ticking steadily on the wall. Emma wrapped her hands around her cup, staring into the steam, and finally let it spill out. "He left me Grandma," she said in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Nathan, he's gone. And I'm pregnant. Mom doesn't want me to keep it. She says it'll ruin my future." Margaret's eyes never left hers. She didn't interrupt, didn't scold, didn't even gasp. She just listened, her gaze steady, her presence like an anchor. Tears slid down Emma's cheeks as she finished. "I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose this baby, but I can't do it alone." Margaret reached across the table and took her granddaughter's trembling hands in her own. Her voice was calm but resolute. "Then you won't do it alone. When you finish school, move here. The local school is always short on teachers. You can work there, and I'll look after the baby." Emma's breath hitched, the words sinking in. For the first time since the cafe, she felt the heavy despair ease enough for hope to slip in. She squeezed her grandmother's hands tightly, her tears now flowing for an entirely different reason. In that small farmhouse kitchen, with the rain tapping softly against the window, Emma felt something she hadn't in weeks. She wasn't abandoned. She wasn't hopeless. She and her child had a place in this world. The winters in the Oregon countryside always carried a sharp bite, but inside Grandma Margaret's farmhouse, warmth seemed to flow from every corner. It was there, in that modest upstairs bedroom with the quilt-covered bed and lace curtains, that Emma brought her son into the world. The labor was long, the pain fierce, but when the midwife finally placed the newborn in her arms, everything else faded. He was small, his fists clenched tight, his cries piercing yet strangely comforting. Emma gazed at him through tear-filled eyes, her heart swelling in a way she had never known before. "Jacob!" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. She had chosen the name because it carried her family's line forward, her name, her strength, her determination. He would not bear Nathan's name. He would bear hers, Jacob Whitaker. From that day on, her life changed completely. The nights were restless, the days exhausting, but Emma never resented it. She rose for feedings in the dark hours, cradled him against her chest until his tiny breaths evened out and smiled through the fatigue. Each milestone, his first smile, his first laugh, the first time he wrapped his small hand around her finger, was like sunlight piercing through clouds. It wasn't easy. Money was scarce. Emma juggled part-time work while finishing her education degree. Margaret stood steadfast beside her, watching Jacob when Emma had classes, cooking warm meals, reminding her that persistence was stronger than despair. "One step at a time, sweetheart," Margaret would say, smoothing back Emma's hair after a long day. "That's how you climb mountains." And Emma climbed. She defended her thesis with Jacob asleep in a carrier at the back of the room. Professors raised their brows at the sight, but no one could question her determination. By the time she graduated, she had already secured a position at the small elementary school just a few miles from her grandmother's farmhouse. The first day, she stood before a class of eager second graders. Chalk in hand, Jacob was barely 2 years old. He toddled around Margaret's living room while Emma taught, his giggles filling the farmhouse during her lunch breaks. Teaching had always been her dream, and now it became her reality. She found joy not only in shaping young minds, but in providing a stable life for her son. Life was modest, but it was full. Each evening, Emma walked home from the school with papers tucked under her arm, her heart lifting when she saw Jacob running to greet her at the gate. He had his mother's eyes and her stubborn chin, but his laughter reminded Emma of her late father, a sound she thought she would never hear again, now reborn in her child. The community began to notice. "You've raised a bright boy," neighbors would remark when Jacob tagged along at the market. "He's polite, well-spoken. You must be proud." Proud didn't even begin to cover it. Jacob was her anchor, her reason to keep moving forward. When loneliness crept in at night, when memories of Nathan's betrayal threatened to sting, Emma would glance at Jacob asleep under his patchwork blanket and know she had chosen the better path. Grandma Margaret remained the steady force in the background, her wisdom shaping both mother and child. She delighted in rocking Jacob to sleep, in teaching him old songs, in sharing stories of Emma's childhood. The farmhouse became more than a refuge. It became the heart of their little family. Years passed in that rhythm. Emma no longer thought of herself as abandoned. She thought of herself as whole, rebuilt in a new form. She was a mother, a teacher, and a granddaughter who had not let hardship destroy her. And every time Jacob's laughter filled the house, she knew her life, though not the one she had once imagined, was exactly where it needed to be. Life in the small farming community near Eugene settled into a steady rhythm. Emma taught her students by day, graded papers at night, and poured the rest of her energy into raising Jacob. It was a full life, though sometimes lonely. She had long since stopped expecting romance. Her son was her heart, her classroom her mission, and Grandma Margaret her anchor. That seemed enough. But life has a way of weaving people together when the time is right. It happened one spring afternoon when the fence along the farmhouse property finally gave way after another storm. Emma stood in the yard with Jacob, staring at the broken posts, her brow furrowed. "Well, that's just great," she muttered, pushing her hair out of her face. Jacob, all of 5 years old, held her hand and asked innocently, "Mom, how will we keep the deer out now?" Before she could answer, a voice called from across the field, "Need a hand with that fence." Emma turned to see Thomas Green, a neighbor whose land bordered theirs. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes. A carpenter by trade, he had helped other neighbors with repairs more times than she could count. She had spoken to him in passing at the market, but nothing more. "That obvious, huh?" Emma said, a touch of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Thomas gave an easy smile. "Don't worry. Happens to everyone out here sooner or later. I've got some spare boards in my truck. If you don't mind, I can fix it up." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "If you're sure, I'd appreciate it." Jacob was the first to warm to him. While Thomas set to work, hammering new boards into place, Jacob peppered him with questions about tools, wood, and how strong he was. Instead of brushing him off, Thomas answered each question patiently, even letting the boy hold a hammer for a moment under his watchful eye. From that day, Thomas began stopping by more often. Sometimes it was to check on the fence, sometimes to drop off fresh eggs, sometimes just to say hello after finishing work. Emma noticed how Jacob's face lit up whenever he appeared, how natural it was for the boy to follow Thomas around the yard, chattering endlessly. Emma was slower to open up. Her past had left scars, and she guarded her heart carefully. But Thomas never pushed. His kindness was steady, his presence quiet but reassuring. He joined them for dinner once, then again, until it became a habit. He never tried to take over, never acted like Jacob wasn't Emma's first priority. Instead, he fit himself gently into the spaces of their life, as if he had always belonged. Seasons turned. Emma found herself laughing more often, lingering in conversation with him long after Jacob had gone to bed. She caught herself watching him repair a gate or carry hay, realizing that her chest didn't feel tight with fear anymore. It felt warm, safe. A year after that first day with the broken fence, Thomas knelt in the small garden behind the farmhouse, a simple silver ring in his hand. There was no grand speech, just a quiet, heartfelt promise. Emma, I don't want to change your life. I just want to share it with you and with Jacob. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered yes. The wedding was simple, attended by neighbors and a few close friends. Grandma Margaret stood proudly by her side, and Jacob, wearing a small suit, grinned from ear to ear as he held the rings. When the vows were spoken and Emma became Mrs. Green, she felt not only like a wife, but like someone who had been given a second chance at happiness. Emma and Jacob moved into Thomas's farmhouse shortly after, blending their lives seamlessly with his. The house echoed with laughter, the yard with Jacob's playful shouts. For the first time in years, Emma lay her head down at night and felt her heart rest completely. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rushed, it was steady, genuine, and real. And that was exactly what she had been searching for all along. The morning was bright and clear, the kind of day perfect for a school field trip. Emma walked at the front of her second grade class, clipboard in hand, while the children chattered excitedly behind her. Jacob, now 7, stayed close to her side, his small backpack bouncing as he kept pace with the group. They had already toured the local museum in Eugene, where wide-eyed children marveled at dinosaur bones and Native American artifacts. Now, with time to spare before catching the train home, Emma led them through the city park nearby. The air was fresh, the grass still damp from last night's sprinklers. Children darted ahead to look at the fountains and flower beds, their voices mingling with the rustle of trees. Emma smiled, calling for them to stay together, her teacher's voice calm but firm. She felt proud of her students, proud of Jacob, proud of the life she had built. Then, as they curved around a path lined with benches, Emma froze. Not 20 yards away, near the edge of the park, stood a figure she knew too well, Nathan Brooks. Her breath caught in her throat before she could stop it. Time seemed to bend, pulling her back to that cafe years ago, to the words that had broken her. But it wasn't the same man she remembered. Nathan's hair was thinner, his jaw tight with tension. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman in a sleek blazer, her arms folded as she snapped something sharp and dismissive. Nathan's voice rose in reply, angry, almost desperate. People passing by slowed to watch as the argument escalated. Nathan gestured wildly toward her, his face flushed with frustration. Emma stood rooted, her students gathering curiously around her. She could hear fragments of their shouting, accusations about money, long hours at work, resentment simmering just below the surface. Nathan's voice, once smooth and charming, sounded coarse, bitter. Her heart thudded, but not from pain this time. She felt nothing. No longing, no anger. Only distance. as though she were observing a stranger's life unravel from behind a pane of glass. "Mom." Jacob tugged at her sleeve, his blue eyes lifting to hers. "Are we going to keep walking?" Emma blinked, then looked down at him. His small hand slid into hers, warm and steady, grounding her in the present. She smiled faintly and squeezed back. "Yes, sweetheart. Let's go." Without another glance, she guided her students along the path, steering them toward the open lawn where ducks waddled near the pond. Behind her, Nathan's voice rose again, harsh and cracking, but she didn't turn. As they walked away, Emma realized something profound. The man who had once shattered her world no longer had any power over her. The sharp edges of the past had dulled. Her life was no longer defined by him, but by the boy whose hand she held and the family waiting for her at home. For the first time since that rainy cafe, Emma felt truly free. The group made its way back toward the train station, the children tired but still buzzing from the day's adventure. Emma walked alongside them, keeping count with her clipboard as they passed shop fronts and cafes lining the street. Jacob skipped ahead a few paces, pointing out a bakery display filled with frosted cupcakes. Emma smiled at his excitement, her heart lightened by the simple joy in his voice. Then her gaze drifted toward the window of a cafe and froze. Inside, seated at a corner table, was Nathan Brooks. Time seemed to slow. He looked older now, lines carved deeper across his forehead, but the way he leaned back in his chair was unmistakable. Across from him sat a younger woman, stylish and confident, her expression sharp even in laughter. Between them, a little girl with curly hair toyed with a spoon, no older than 5 or 6. Emma's stomach tightened, her breath catching. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her past, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the nights she cried into her pillow, was suddenly sitting only a few feet away, smiling at another family. Then Nathan noticed her. His eyes widened, recognition flashing instantly. He straightened and lifted his hand in a casual wave, as if they were old friends who had simply crossed paths on the street. The woman beside him followed his gaze, and when she spotted Emma, her lips curved into a smirk. She leaned close to Nathan, whispering something Emma couldn't hear, before laughing aloud. Nathan chuckled with her, the two of them sharing some private mockery at Emma's expense. The sound, even muffled through the glass, pierced her like a blade. Emma's legs stiffened, her chest heavy with the weight of years she thought she had already buried. But only for a moment. "Mrs. Green," one of her students tugged at her sleeve. "Are we getting on the train soon?" Emma blinked, pulling herself back into the present. Jacob was at her side now, looking up with concern. She forced her lips into a small smile and nodded. "Yes, we are. Come on, everyone, let's not be late." Gathering her class, she turned her back to the cafe. The voices, the laughter, the memories, they could stay behind that glass. She guided the children swiftly toward the platform, her steps purposeful. As they climbed aboard the waiting train, Emma heard a faint voice calling her name from behind. She didn't turn. She ushered Jacob inside, making sure every child was accounted for, her movements calm and deliberate. The door slid closed, the whistle blew, and the train lurched forward. Through the window, she caught one last glimpse of Nathan standing outside the cafe, his expression unreadable as he watched the train pull away. Emma exhaled slowly, her heart steadying. The past had reached for her one final time, but she had chosen not to take its hand. Whatever pain remained belonged to yesterday. Today, she belonged to her son, her students, and the life she had built with Thomas. The ghosts could stay behind. She was moving forward. The train jolted softly as it began to move, its wheels clattering against the rails with a steady rhythm. Emma guided her students to their seats, her teacher's voice calm and practiced as she counted heads once more. Jacob slid into the window seat beside her, pressing his small palms against the cool glass. He squinted, his brow furrowed. "Mom," he asked quietly, "who was that man?" "The one who kept looking at you." Emma's breath caught, but she forced her shoulders to relax. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and smiled gently at him. "Just someone who thought he knew me," she said softly. "Probably a mistake." Jacob studied her for a moment longer, as though weighing her answer, then nodded and turned back to the window. Emma hesitated before following his gaze. And there Nathan was. He stood alone on the platform, his posture stiff, his face pale in the fading afternoon light. The little girl and the woman from the cafe were nowhere in sight. Nathan's eyes, fixed on the departing train, carried something Emma hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not mockery, but a hollow sort of confusion, almost regret. He raised a hand slightly, as though tempted to wave again, but let it fall uselessly at his side. Emma's chest tightened, but not with the familiar ache of old wounds. Instead, she felt an unexpected calm wash over her. She didn't wave back. She didn't even nod. She turned her focus to the boy seated beside her, who was already pulling a notebook from his backpack to sketch the ducks he had seen in the park. The train picked up speed, carrying them farther from the platform, farther from the man who had once dictated the course of her life. Nathan's figure grew smaller through the glass until he was only a blur against the concrete. Finally, he vanished altogether, swallowed by the distance. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For years, the shadow of that cafe conversation had followed her, the sting of betrayal creeping into quiet nights. She had wondered what she would feel if she ever saw Nathan again. Rage, grief, maybe some desperate hope. But now, in this moment, she felt none of those things. What she felt was release. Her hand rested lightly on Jacob's shoulder, steady and protective. He looked up, grinning as he held out his drawing for her approval. Emma smiled back, her heart full, unburdened. The past had tried to catch her, tried to remind her of what she had lost. But she no longer lived there. Her life was here, with the child who needed her, with the man who loved her, with the home that waited for her return. Outside the window, fields rolled past, golden with late afternoon light. Emma leaned back in her seat, her eyes closing briefly. She felt free, as though the last chain tying her to Nathan had broken. At last, the ghosts were gone. By the time the train pulled into the small rural station, the sun was dipping low, painting the Oregon sky in shades of pink and gold. The children filed off, their chatter buzzing with leftover excitement from the trip. Emma guided Jacob down the platform, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Each step away from the city felt like a step deeper into peace. When they reached the farmhouse, the smell of something warm and savory drifted through the open windows. Thomas was in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, moving confidently between the stove and the counter. He looked up as Emma and Jacob walked in, his face breaking into an easy smile. "Perfect timing," he said, lifting a skillet. "Dinner's almost ready. Just waiting on my fishing partner here." He winked at Jacob. Jacob dropped his backpack by the door and ran forward, practically bouncing on his toes. "Dad, tomorrow I'm going to catch the biggest fish in the whole river, bigger than the one we saw at the museum today. You'll see." Thomas laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Well then, I'd better bring an extra pan, because your mom's going to need proof." Emma leaned against the doorway for a moment, watching them. The soft lamplight wrapped the room in warmth, the kind of warmth no storm could ever chase away. Her son's laughter rang clear, steady, unburdened. Thomas moved with the kind of ease that came only from love freely given, not earned through guilt or pity. Jacob darted over to her, tugging at her hand. "Mom, you'll eat the first piece, right? Promise." Emma bent down, brushing a kiss across his forehead. "I promise," she whispered, her smile tender. She glanced at Thomas then, their eyes meeting in quiet understanding. There were no grand gestures, no speeches, just the shared knowledge that what they had built together was real, and it was enough. Emma slipped off her coat and hung it by the door. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel the weight of what had been. She didn't hear Nathan's voice in the back of her mind, didn't see the shadows of that rainy cafe years ago. Those ghosts had no place here. What mattered was the boy twirling in the kitchen, excited about tomorrow's fishing trip. What mattered was the man stirring a pot on the stove, humming softly to himself. What mattered was the life they had created together, steady, honest, whole. Emma walked into the kitchen, wrapping her arms briefly around Thomas's waist, resting her cheek against his back. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently, and she knew she was exactly where she belonged. The past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was here. Now, You're just not interesting anymore, Isabel. I need someone who turns heads, not someone buried in property contracts all day. Those were the exact words my husband, Nathan Calloway, said to me on a Tuesday evening, right after I confronted him with proof of his affair. No apology, no shame, just a cold, effortless dismissal like I was a pair of shoes that had gone out of style. I stood there, holding his old MacBook with the screen still lit up, open to a secret Facebook profile he hadn't bothered to log out of. The messages were there, dozens, between him and a woman named, well, that part doesn't matter. What mattered was the confirmation, the tone, the pictures, the dates, and the part where he said, "My wife has no idea. She still thinks I'm on a business trip. Honestly, she's too busy being boring." I felt the ground tilt beneath me, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I asked, calm but shaking, "Are you cheating on me, Nathan?" He didn't even blink. "Yes," he said flatly, pouring himself a glass of wine like we were discussing the weather. "And before you go into one of your dramatic courtroom-style interrogations, let me save you time. I'm divorcing you. I've already hired a lawyer. You'll be hearing from him soon. His name is Derek Linwood. Fantastic guy. Knows how to handle sensitive messes like this." A mess. That's what I had become to him. 12 years of marriage, reduced to a line item on a legal to-do list. Why? I whispered. Not because I didn't already know the answer, but because some pathetic part of me still wanted to hear something. Anything human. His reply? Because I can. Because I'm successful now. Because I don't need a wife who dresses like a real estate agent and acts like a teacher. You're a liability to my image, Isabel. I'm trying to build an empire here. You don't fit. And just like that, the person I had stood beside through sleepless startup years, through failed pitches and unpaid taxes, through panic attacks and pressure, now saw me as a stain he couldn't bleach out. He left the room after that. I stayed, alone, still holding the laptop, still staring at the screen, still trying to remember if I had missed a sign, a warning, something that would have told me, "You're not safe in this love anymore." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, replaying every moment from the last 2 years. The cold shoulders, the business trips that didn't need receipts, the sudden obsession with his appearance, the new cologne, the gym memberships, the way he never looked up when I walked into the room. And worst of all, how I had convinced myself that marriage just goes through phases. By dawn, my heartbreak had curdled into something sharper. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. I was a licensed attorney in the state of Massachusetts. I had built my own firm before I was 30. And more importantly, I had drafted the prenup. That detail hit me like a lightning bolt. Back then, Nathan insisted on it. "Just in case," he said with a smirk. But I had insisted too. My clause. My protection. It was buried on page 8 under dissolution of marriage infidelity clause. In the event of proven extramarital conduct by Mr. Calloway, Ms. Monroe shall be entitled to 50% of all business holdings accrued during the marriage. I laughed, actually laughed, because for someone who always called me the boring one, Nathan had made a spectacular mistake in underestimating just how much attention I paid to detail. I shut the laptop, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. He wasn't there. probably already off to his new life. I packed my essentials, my files, my clothes, my dignity. I left the ring, and before I locked the door behind me for good, I typed one message on his phone, just one. I took my boring face and lawyer clothes out of your empire. You're welcome. Then I went home, not to an apartment, not to a hotel. I went back to the brownstone I'd bought in Beacon Hill when I was 26. The one Nathan always called too small and too sentimental. It was in my name, paid off, untouched, waiting. I didn't cry until I walked into the guest room and saw the stack of law textbooks I'd never gotten rid of. The ones he said made me look like a nerd, the ones that helped me build the brain he was about to regret messing with. So he wanted a divorce. He wanted his lawyer to handle me. He thought I'd go quietly, cry in silence, disappear like an embarrassed has-been. He had no idea who I was, but he would, very soon. I didn't waste time. 2 days after walking out of that glass and chrome mausoleum Nathan called a home, I had already moved back into my brownstone and converted the study into a war room. There were folders, legal pads, digital backups, and most importantly, a copy of the prenup in pristine condition, annotated by yours truly. The funny thing was, Nathan never reread it after signing. He was so eager to show me he wasn't scared of legalese that he skimmed and scribbled his name like he was signing a birthday card. I remembered the smug look on his face as he said, "Let's just get this formality over with. I trust you." And I had trusted him, just not blindly. He thought I'd forget the clause. He thought he'd keep me so emotionally disoriented I wouldn't think straight. But I was already 10 steps ahead. The day after I confirmed the prenup's power, I sent a simple message to Derek Linwood, Nathan's fancy lawyer. It read, "Mr. Linwood, my name is Isabel Monroe. I'd like to set a meeting to discuss the divorce proceedings your client initiated. I'm available Thursday at 9 a.m. Let me know if that works." No threats, no drama, just business. That always unsettles people more than yelling. Thursday morning came quickly. I wore navy, understated, efficient, and hard to read, just like me. The cafe was 2 blocks from the courthouse, and I arrived exactly 1 minute before 9. Derek was already seated, glancing nervously at his phone, probably Googling who I was. When he saw me, his eyes flickered with confusion, then recognition, then discomfort. "Ms. Monroe," he said, rising halfway from his seat. "Yes," I replied. "Shall we?" We exchanged pleasantries, ordered coffee. He tried to project confidence. I let him. He clearly hadn't been told who I really was. After 5 minutes of legal foreplay, I leaned forward slightly and asked, "Did Nathan tell you he cheated on me?" He froze, blinked, fumbled for a response. I don't believe he mentioned that, no. "Interesting," I said, keeping my tone light. "Did he mention the prenup?" "The prenup. There's a clause. Page 8. I wrote it myself. Infidelity equals 50% business equity to the wronged spouse." His jaw clenched. I wasn't made aware of that. I figured. Nathan doesn't usually give people the full story, especially not people he's about to throw under the bus. I opened my bag and placed a folder on the table. Inside, a printed copy of the prenup, signed and notarized, along with screenshots of texts, pictures of him and his mistress on company trips labeled as board retreats, timestamps, and hotel receipts that left no room for speculation. I slid the folder across the table. He didn't speak for nearly a minute, just stared, then flipped, then sighed. "This is substantial." "Yes, it is." "MS. Monroe, if I may, you may," I said. "I had no idea I'd be dealing with someone of your caliber." "That's your client's mistake. He never took my work seriously. He said I played lawyer while he built something real." Derek's face flushed. "I apologize, professionally and personally." "Don't. You're not the enemy here. But if you continue representing him without understanding the whole picture, You'll become collateral damage. I didn't have to say more. Derek understood. He promised to review the documents and speak to his client before proceeding further. I nodded, thanked him for his time, and left. The second I stepped out into the cold Boston air, I inhaled deeply. That wasn't revenge yet. That was stage setting. But oh, it was satisfying. That evening, as I settled into my reading chair with a glass of Cabernet, my phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. Just 3 words. You're unbelievable, Isabel. I smirked. No, Nathan. I'm just well prepared. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Derek. Short, polite, and tense. Ms. Monroe, thank you for your time yesterday. Due to unforeseen complications, I'll be withdrawing from the case. Please expect a transition notice from Mr. Calloway shortly. I let the phone drop onto the blanket and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. 1 down. I wasn't keeping score, but if I were, this was a clean hit. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The sound of silence was often more effective than any legal rebuttal. I just waited, and Nathan didn't disappoint. By noon, he was calling me. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text. Pick up. We need to talk. I didn't. 2 hours later, another text. What the hell did you say to my lawyer? I considered writing back, just the truth. But it wasn't worth the energy. When he called the 3rd time, I answered, not because I wanted to hear him, but because I wanted to watch him fall apart in real time. Nathan, I said evenly, I told you we're communicating through lawyers. You don't have a lawyer, he snapped. Oh, but I will. Just like you used to. How's that going, by the way? You sabotaged him, he hissed. I almost laughed. No, Nathan. I handed him facts. Apparently those were enough. This is war now, Isabel. You want to drag this out, ruin everything. No, I said. I want a clean, fast divorce, one that follows the prenup. You remember the prenup, right? The one you signed with your uninteresting wife. Silence. Then a click. He hung up. 3 days passed. I focused on work, declined to comment on the dozens of voicemails he left, ranging from rage to begging. One evening, I was organizing case files when there was a knock at the front door. I peered through the window. Nathan. He looked nothing like the smug man I had last seen. His shirt was wrinkled, hair disheveled, jaw tight. I opened the door a sliver. We're not doing this here, I said. I need to talk to you. Then find another lawyer. That's how this works. He stepped forward. I can't find one. They all say no the moment they hear your name. Imagine that, I said. Almost like there are consequences to lying and cheating and underestimating your opponent. He glanced behind him, as if to make sure no one was watching, then lowered his voice. Please, Isabel, don't take the business. Take the house, the cars, the stocks, just not the company. You know what it means to me. Of course I do, I said, voice like glass. That's why I'm taking it. He slumped slightly, the fight draining out of him. I made a mistake. Which one? I asked. The cheating? The prenup? Or the part where you told me I wasn't worthy of your last name? He had no answer, just stood there, looking like a man watching his empire burn in slow motion. I shouldn't have listened to her, he mumbled. I nodded. There it is. Blame the mistress. Classic Nathan. She said she'd leave if I didn't divorce you. She said I'd be happier. And now? She left anyway. Said she doesn't date broke men. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a mocking laugh. Not cruel. Just release. So let me get this straight. You threw away a 12-year marriage, committed adultery, tried to hide it, and are now surprised that your gold-digging mistress bailed when the gold ran out. He nodded, shame flickering in his expression. I'd never seen him look this small. Nathan, I said, opening the door just a little wider, not to let him in, but to lean closer. You put the clause in the prenup. You wanted to prove you were transparent. Now that clause is taking half your company. That's not sabotage. That's you losing to your own arrogance. He blinked, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. You thought I'd cry, beg, disappear, I whispered. But you forgot I'm a lawyer. I don't run from fights. I win them. Then I closed the door, and behind it I let out a long breath. Not out of sadness, not anger, just control. I wasn't done. Not yet. By the end of that week, Nathan had spiraled from smug businessman to frantic has-been. Word was spreading quietly, among colleagues, among lawyers, among mutual friends, that something had gone very wrong with the golden boy of Beacon Square. He'd burned his credibility, and now even his charm was starting to crack. I got another knock at the door. This time at night. I was already in my robe, brushing out my hair in the bathroom mirror. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this was going to be the last time I needed to see him in person. I opened the door just enough to see him standing there under the porch light, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I just want to talk, he muttered. I sighed. You've been doing nothing but trying to talk. You fired the first shot, remember? He stepped inside without waiting. I didn't stop him. Let him have his 5 minutes of groveling. I've tried every firm in the city, he said. They all turned me down. Some said you were too close. Others just didn't want the drama. I sat on the arm of the couch and crossed my arms. So now I'm the villain because no one wants to clean up your mess? You're manipulating everything, he snapped. You're sabotaging this. I laughed. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you under the impression that people need my permission to walk away from clients like you? You lied to your lawyer. You withheld a prenup. You committed adultery. And you acted like I was just some pretty ornament. This isn't sabotage, Nathan. This is gravity. You're falling, and for once there's no one to catch you. He was breathing heavily, hands shaking. Please, Isabel. You know I've built that business from scratch. It's all I have left. You don't need half of it. But you promised me half, I said. You signed it. It's not my greed, Nathan. It's your signature. It was just legal fluff. We didn't think it would come to that. No, you didn't think I'd fight back. He paced the living room like a caged animal, then suddenly stopped and looked at me, eyes glassy, voice cracking. Look, I put my relationship on hold. I told her we needed space. I thought maybe we could talk. Maybe we could try again. We had good years, Isabel. And there it was. The desperation. The delusion. You're asking me to come back to a marriage you already set on fire? I said, stunned but not surprised. I was scared. I got caught up. I wanted more. And now that you've lost more than you imagined, you want to rewind. He nodded, slowly as if trying to will me into agreement. I shook my head almost gently. Nathan, no. You don't want me. You want leverage. You want safety. But I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your foundation anymore. He tried one more time. You're not like this. You're not cold. No, I said, standing. I'm precise. I've spent 12 years keeping the peace, swallowing words, bending backward. This is the first time I'm standing still. And guess what? It's not cold. It's freedom. He swallowed hard, eyes darting around the room like he was searching for something. Maybe the version of me that used to ask what's wrong when he walked in the door with that same defeated look. She's gone, I said quietly. You made your point, he whispered. You win. I leaned in. Nathan, this isn't a game. Winning would mean I wanted to keep score. But this is just balance being restored. He left soon after. No more grand speeches. No more begging. Just a man walking out the door of a life he shattered with his own ego. And as I watched him go, I didn't feel sad, or angry, or vindicated. I felt clear. I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and picked up my phone. It was time to hire a lawyer, not for battle, but for closure. I didn't choose someone flashy. No TV lawyers, no courtroom celebrities, Just a sharp, methodical litigator from my own firm named Karen Bishop. Someone who didn't flinch under pressure and didn't take calls after 6 p.m. I handed her everything. The prenup, the affair documents, the financial records. I didn't want Nathan hearing from me again. From that point on, I spoke only through her. Nathan tried to drag things out, claimed the prenup might be invalid, said the photos were out of context, hired one lawyer, then another, then another. None lasted more than a week. The moment they saw what I had in my arsenal and who I was, they backed out politely. Some didn't even give him a reason. One even emailed me privately, "You've already won." He just hasn't accepted it yet. When he finally stopped trying to fight, he started trying to plead. Emails started arriving. Then, handwritten letters. "Let's talk. We used to laugh together." I remember when we couldn't sleep without touching feet. The nostalgia was predictable and utterly useless. Then one afternoon, a messenger knocked on my door. He was holding a small box. Inside was Nathan's wedding band and a folded note. "Take it all, just not the business. Please." I didn't respond. I forwarded the message to Karen. She sent a final settlement proposal with a clean list. Half the business, immediate divorce finalization. No alimony, no further negotiation. It was our best and final offer. The prenup didn't require negotiation. It guaranteed entitlement. 3 days later, he showed up again. This time he didn't knock. Just stood on the sidewalk, staring at the windows of my brownstone like a man looking into a museum of someone he used to know. I opened the door only enough for my voice to reach him. "What do you want now, Nathan?" He looked exhausted, pale, like the fight had been replaced by a hollow nothing. "I just thought you'd be the one person who wouldn't destroy me," he murmured. "I didn't destroy you," I said. "You wrote your own ending. You just forgot I was holding the pen." He stared at me, mouth open, no words. "You said I wasn't interesting," I reminded him, "that I didn't fit your empire. But guess what, Nathan? I am the empire now." He walked away without another word. And this time, I didn't even bother watching him go. By the end of that week, he'd signed everything. Half the company was legally mine. Karen handled the paperwork with brutal elegance. Nathan had to put out a press release to explain his personal restructuring. Investors weren't happy. And the cherry on top? His mistress was now completely gone, vanished, blocked him on everything. Rumor had it she was seen cozying up to one of his business rivals at a gala he wasn't invited to. The man who had once made me feel small, average, and invisible was now watching his legacy slip through his fingers, while I thrived. I didn't touch his house or his cars. I didn't need to. The business was the heart of his pride, and I now owned half of it. He tried calling me one last time after the court finalized the split. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You'll regret this one day, Isabel. You'll end up alone." I deleted it because the truth was I'd never felt more whole. After the ink dried on the final decree, I didn't throw a party. I didn't pop champagne or post a cryptic quote online like some passive-aggressive social media victory lap. No, I just exhaled, long deep, like I had been holding my breath for 12 years. The divorce was over. The business was split. My name was on every document that used to pretend I didn't exist. Nathan had gone quiet. No calls, no emails, no new lawyers, just silence. I could feel it like a vacuum around him. He was drowning, but this time I wasn't the life raft. I moved forward quickly. I hired a manager to oversee my share of the company, not because I didn't care, but because I was busy rebuilding my own life. I reopened my practice, took on fewer but higher profile clients, and spent more time in court than I had in years. It felt invigorating, like I was rediscovering a version of myself I'd put in a drawer just to make room for his ego. The brownstone, my once quiet retreat, became a place of motion again. I repainted the kitchen, replaced the old blinds, bought a real espresso machine. My mornings started with the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of jazz playing low through the speakers. No more cold silences, no more slammed doors. Just me, at peace. But Nathan? He was unraveling. The mistress was gone. His reputation in the tech health world had taken a hit after news spread that he lost half his company to a prenup violation. He tried to secure a loan to buy me out, but he had already drained his reserves during the legal battle. Investors backed away, quietly. His board began voting without him. Eventually, he was asked to step down. He sold the house to cover legal debts, moved into a rented condo in Cambridge. Last I heard, he was trying to start over, rebranding, repackaging, repitching. But the glow was gone. No one wanted to fund a fallen star, especially not one who couldn't even keep his personal life from imploding. Sometimes I'd walk past his old building on my way to court, just to remind myself how much I survived. I never stopped or looked inside. I didn't need to. The building was still standing, but I wasn't the one crumbling anymore. I never spoke to him again, and I never regretted it, because here's the thing. Nathan thought I was the mistake. He thought I was the woman he settled for until someone better came along. He thought I was the burden weighing down his potential, but in reality, I was the firewall. I was the structure that held him upright for years. And the moment I walked away, he collapsed under the weight of his own ambition. Now, people recognize me not as his ex-wife, but as Isabel Monroe, a lawyer who held her ground, a woman who didn't burn down the house, just took her half of it and built a better one. I live differently now, not extravagantly, just honestly. I don't explain myself anymore. I don't shrink to make anyone comfortable. And I certainly don't apologize for protecting what I've earned. There's peace in knowing you were right, but there's power in knowing you never needed to be loud about it. Nathan once said I wasn't interesting, that I didn't belong in his world, that I was just another chapter in his story. Funny how life works. Turns out I was the whole plot.